Why do people volunteer? I think this is probably one of the most important questions, because we have to know why people volunteer so that we can effectively work with them and help them to find joy in what they're doing. It not only allows us to move mountains as an organization with tiny staffs, but we want people to feel that they have made a difference. And that might mean something for every single person you work with. And it really is worth the time getting to know every volunteer. And I think you're a perfect example. You started out perhaps doing one thing, and you've said now you've been promoted up the food chain. So someone saw something in you that they nurtured and they cultivated. And I'm not sure what that is, but it's probably on this list here somewhere. People volunteer because they want to learn about new things. Maybe they want, to pursue something that's been of interest to them their whole lives. Maybe they want to volunteer for social reasons. I always use my mother-in-law as an example. Her life revolves around her volunteering at the Jupiter Lighthouse. She's made her friends. She looks forward to being there on her volunteer day. And it would take heaven and earth to move something to make her miss that day. That's how serious she is about her volunteer experience. Other people are just passionate about a cause. And there are so many reasons on this sheet. You may see yourself on this sheet, and hopefully you'll see those that volunteer with you so that you can start to figure out ways to provide a meaningful experience for them. Perhaps you work with someone who has a professional expertise, whether it's accounting, finance, tutoring, resume building. So many of you work with feeding programs. If there are outshoots from that, where there are case managers working with families, if you are interacting with people that are literally serving meals, but earlier in the day they've had on their three-piece suit and they work at a bank or they work in a school teaching, those are tips for you to pick up on and perhaps engage that volunteer even further into service on your behalf. So it's really important to try to get to the root of why people volunteer. Maybe it's an extension of their faith. Maybe they want to learn something new. Maybe they just want to be around positive energy. It's a good way to get out into the community and do something meaningful. It's also a really good team building opportunity as well. And those of you that have the feeding programs, the after school programs, to engage a Cub Scout troop or Girl Scouts or youth groups. There are so many opportunities, and that's team building for those that are participating as well. So you draw them in, they're doing something fun like that, and the next thing you know, they're hooked. They feel good about what they're doing to help you. Any questions, comments?
The thing that I wanted to add about volunteer recruitment and retention is that it's very important to get to know your volunteers so that you can utilize their gifts to the best of everybody's abilities. Because if we can engage someone that is a financial advisor to help someone that's in a place where if they could get a little bit of financial knowledge that they've never been shared before, it could make a difference in their lives. And so it's just really important to make sure that as the directors and overseers of your program, you're looking for those passions that your volunteers bring to your organization. Getting to know that volunteer, whether it's me personally or the person that is overseeing their area, is to get to know that person, find out where their passion lies, where are their gifts, where are their talents.
Koki makes a good point. You may have folks that sit at a desk all day and they crunch numbers, they're a CPA, and when they come to your door, the last thing they want to do is anything to do with math. So that's why it's so critical. That might be their talent, but they might want a different experience working with you. They might want to be on the floor playing with little children. You just never know. You can't assume. You would hope that they would share those talents and gifts that they have. And most of the time, 99% of the time, that's what they want to do. But it really is important to take the time. The next thing, if you're without a volunteer program and you want to create one, now's the time to get your ducks in a row. And what do I mean by that? You need to have something structured to share with your potential volunteers. And the best way is to start with the job description. Now, you may have 20 structured volunteer opportunities, and that job description might be slightly different for each one. But if you look at the job description here, this is one for a volunteer coordinator. So this particular person is not just going to volunteer, but they're going to oversee perhaps a team of volunteers. So we've got a summary of what that job is. Do you see the form Koki is showing right here?
It says volunteer coordinator position description at the top.
There you go. And it looks like any job description that might be in any office across Palm Beach County. It speaks to the duties, and it speaks to who supervises who, what the qualifications might be, and it really is the framework so that that volunteer doesn't have questions. Well, am I supposed to do that, or should I not do that? Am I stepping on anyone's toes? So that's an opportunity to have something very structured in place. And that volunteer, you'll sit down with that person and they will sign it. You might make changes to it. This is nothing that is etched in stone. You would take this and adapt it to whatever your needs are. And if there's something in there and this particular volunteer says, well, I'm not comfortable doing that, then either it's a deal breaker or you just mark it out and say, you know what, if you don't have a comfort level with that, that won't be part of your responsibility. So it's an opportunity to tailor this to whatever it is that your needs are. Any questions, comments? Koki?
With my experience in having job descriptions, it actually helps bring volunteers to the table, because if I can post maybe not the full job description, but like on this next page, you'll see volunteer opportunities, and it gives just a short blurb of what that job might entail. At least then you've answered some of the questions that a volunteer may have. What is it that I'm going to do? What is it that they need me to do? And therefore, it allows that conversation to begin, because you can give them areas of need, and then you can bring them in and have the discussion and figure out exactly where they fit best.
And again, you know, a different job description for each specific position that you have. Someone may look at that and say, oh my gosh, this means they want me to just sit in an office and file papers or answer phones or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, if they knew me better, they would know that I'm very social and I need to be with a group of people, so I can be maybe stuffing envelopes, but I want to be chatting with people and I want to get to know you, and that would be important to me. So again, it ties back to get to know your volunteer, because if I'm Miss Social and you put me in a little room to file something all by myself, I may not come back the next day. So it's really important to get to know your volunteers, because you want them to be happy, and as they're happy, they're moving your organization forward.
Also, while you're engaging volunteers, you want to gather information about them. You want them to have buy-in to your program, and you also want to be able to share information with them. So by gathering some information, when you send out newsletters, or if you have tomorrow you need something done, you go, oh, okay, Sylvia says she is good on an on-call basis, so I can call Sylvia today to see if she can come in tomorrow, even though she's not scheduled. So by collecting volunteer information and keeping a database of that information, it allows you to know who wants to do what, when they are available, and it also allows you to communicate with them on an ongoing basis to keep them engaged into in the program that they are volunteering for. when you are able to keep volunteers informed, they get a larger idea of what it is you're doing and who you're serving. Because if they are stuffing envelopes or preparing a meal, then they don't get the whole picture of what you guys are doing or what we are doing. So through communication, you can expand that and hopefully get maybe a larger buy-in, and maybe they'll bring other volunteers as well.
So looking back at that sheet that's two-sided and it has all the different volunteer opportunities, this is just kind of scratching the surface. Feel free to add your own items to this. As Koki said, take it with you, put it in a newsletter, or perhaps you have an exhibit at a mission and outreach or a social action type of function. Take these things with you. Somebody might pick it up and go, oh wow, I can use my hobby skills, of crafting, and I can go sit and work with a group of children on a rainy Saturday. It allows you to just trigger different ideas of how you can get involved, because all of these gifts are crucial to an organization. The other sheet, you can kind of chunk it down if you want to break it down like we did on this other sheet, where it's kind of by task: office help, maintenance, sponsorships, facilitating workshops. We kind of broke it down by category. And again, it helps you to think of ways to pull in anyone that you think can help to accomplish what you need to accomplish.
Once you gather the information from a volunteer, once you have that person engaged and wanting to be there, we have an interview process at Family Promise. We have a person that's what they do. They meet with our volunteers, they introduce them to our program, they give them a tour of our facility, they talk about all the different volunteer opportunities, they talk about what our current needs are. So in that interview process, we're explaining who we are, as well as getting to know who this new volunteer is. Finding out what their interests are, what their job is, what they hope to take from this position. What is it that you want to do? What is it that would fill you? It's going to serve our families and our organization, but it's important that it serve the volunteer as well, because if a volunteer does not get that feeding, that nurturing that they need and want from being a volunteer, then we're going to lose that volunteer as well. So this interview process is a getting to know you way of getting a little bit more information about those people and being able to help place them in a position that will be beneficial to all.
This is really approached, if you will, as if it's a paid employee. And as we know, some of our volunteers do so much for us, there's no way we could pay them for what they give to us in return. And so we approach it very businesslike. And the next thing you'll see is a sample volunteer application. And it looks just like a job application that you might fill out if you were going to apply at CVS on the corner. And again, it's asking for emergency contact information. On the back of it, it's looking for particular areas where you have interests. Again, this is just stuff that's made up. I think the back sheet might have even come from something that the Red Cross did. So some of those things are going to, Bloodmobile. Well, that's not going to apply to Family Promise, but it might apply in your organization, or you simply just make these changes to make it match what you're doing. But again, it's an approach that is very business-minded, if you will.
Once the interview process has taken place and it's time for orientation, Family Promise actually has a training program where the volunteers are trained before they're allowed to participate. We want to make sure that volunteers understand when they are speaking to someone, basically to treat people with dignity and respect across the board. However, sometimes if you are working with families or individuals that are in a precarious situation, there are certain things that you don't want to approach with them. One of the things that bothers our families is when a volunteer says, "Why are you here?" or "How did you get in this situation?" You know, and they don't mean anything horrible by that, but those are the kinds of things that can cause upset in everything that you do. So by training your volunteers and giving them that information, that heads up, that just to be aware of what they say and how they present themselves, that is really important. Once you've gone through that orientation, that training process, I always send a letter to just say thank you for joining us. I look forward to working with you. So there's a copy of that in this packet as well.
Part of that orientation in our shop is that an individual signs what we call the Code of Professional Conduct. Now, this is something that we created to let our volunteers and our staff and our coordinators, all key people that would have any exposure at all to the families that we serve, we ask that they read and sign the Code of Professional Conduct. There are times in what we do where a volunteer may observe a child's behavior or an adult's behavior, and they may have questions around it, they may have judgment around that. What we want them to know, and this all comes out through that orientation, is that you will hear things, you will see things. You may, you know, this is where you need to come to a staff person if you have a concern. This is where you do not turn to your neighbor and place bets on whether or not that family will be in the program the next time you see them. And, you know, it sounds funny, it sounds rude, but that was a real experience that we had in our operation where some volunteers, well-meaning, they provided a delicious dinner for our families one evening, and they're standing around and they're just kind of standing around waiting while people eat and whatnot. And someone overheard one volunteer placing bets with her group. That family's not going to be here next time the hosting comes around to this church. Someone overheard it that really shouldn't have overheard it. First of all, it's not appropriate. It's not at all tolerated, but it happened. Now, this is after training, so sometimes even with the best intentions and training and all those things, things still happen. But luckily, word got to me, and I was able to intervene in that situation. But again, you know, it really, the more training, the more orientation, the more kind of looking back towards this Code of Professional Conduct, you almost see yourself as a social worker, if you will. You know, meaning I am going to witness some confidential things and I'm going to keep it to myself. I'm not going to go home and discuss it with my spouse. I'm not going to talk about it in bridge club or the men's group. You know, these are real people with real lives with very serious issues. And so we approach it as this is professional, ethical conduct that we present of ourselves when we are volunteering. Has anyone had any experiences like that, or does anyone use something like this in working with volunteers? Okay.
We always have our volunteers signed, as well as a code of conduct, a confidentiality agreement. What you hear here, see here, stays here kind of thing, as well as a photo and video release, because you want to be able to publicize your programs, whether it be on the internet or in the net or wherever. And it's really important for you to have signed releases, not just from the people you serve, but from the people that are serving.
The other thing that we include and ask our volunteers to sign off on is Safeguarding God's Children has a very nice list of appropriate and inappropriate behaviors around children.
Yes.
And we include that as part of our volunteer file, and each year go back through it, because we find that very well-meaning people still cross some boundaries with children that could really harm the whole program.
Very, very good point. And, you know, so many of you do work with children, you work with adults, but it's all very critical. Very good point. Thank you for that.